Today we're diving into a true story that is genuinely chilling. It's about that razor-thin line between self-help and something far more dangerous, a kind of cult-like extremism. We're talking about the story of James Arthur Ray. He was an American motivational guru, a life coach, whose charisma was so convincing it promised his followers empowerment, but ultimately led 3 of them to their deaths.
And this case is so important because it really dissects how these powerful, persuasive figures operate. It's about that moment when a belief system completely overrides rational caution and even your most basic survival instincts.
Let's start with the man himself, the architect of all this, James Arthur Ray. He was born in 1957 in Honolulu. His father was a preacher, but the family was actually quite poor. And this seems to be a key detail because it led Ray to question his faith, to feel, well, abandoned. He also had a tough childhood. He said he was bullied, had thick glasses, protruding teeth, and all of that fueled this intense desire for change, for self-improvement, especially after high school. He got into intense training, bought a motorcycle, really tried to reinvent himself. Before becoming a guru, he spent about 10 years as a sales manager at AT&T. And that's where he really honed his skills in persuasion and public speaking. He then launched a few companies, things like Quantum Consulting Group and James Ray & Associate, all focused on success. But right from the start, there were, let's say, some red flags about how he built his credibility.
Exactly. This is where we see a very early pattern emerge. He started claiming that he had worked with Stephen Covey.
The Stephen Covey, the author of The 7 Habits.
The one and only, a huge name. But Covey's Inner Circle later came out and completely refuted it. They said it was a lie, an exaggeration designed to, borrow authority and inflate his own status.
And that pattern just got bigger. In 2005, he goes on this spiritual trip to Mount Sinai in Egypt, looking for Moses' cave. He comes back with his new philosophy, mixing his own beliefs with quantum physics. And then came the big break. He was featured in The Secret, that huge project about the law of attraction. And then an appearance on the Oprah Winfrey Show. That just skyrocketed his credibility into the stratosphere.
And using quantum physics, that was a genius move in a manipulative way. It wasn't about science. It was about making his ideas sound profound, verifiable. It gave this veneer of intellectual legitimacy to what was essentially just his own belief system.
Right. And with that credibility, he started to escalate his courses. They stopped being just motivational speeches and became extreme. Genuinely dangerous. He told his followers that to really break through their mental limits, they had to perform these alarming physical tests. We're talking about walking on broken glass.
Unbelievable.
Walking across fire. Bending solid steel rods with their necks. Even slamming their hands onto concrete blocks. There's this one story of a woman who severely injured her wrist trying to do a karate chop through a piece of wood, all because he commanded it.
And you can see the psychology at work there. It's a compliance slaughter. Once you've done something like bend a steel rod with your throat, you've invested so much trust and belief that you're far less likely to question the next command, no matter how much more dangerous it is.
And people were very, very invested. By 2009, his company, James Ray International, was making about $9.4 million a year. He built this pyramid of commitment. At the very top was the spiritual warrior status. And that promised absolute success. But only after you pass the most rigorous tests. Which brings us to October 2009, the 5-day spiritual warrior camp near Sedona, Arizona. Only 50 people were selected. And you have to understand, each one of them paid $9,612 to be there.
A staggering amount of money.
A huge amount. And the conditions they were put through before the final test were just brutal. There was a mandatory 36-hour fast, no food at all. Everyone, men and women, had to shave their heads as a way to, quote, reject vanity. And even with that massive entry fee, there was no accommodation. They were given a sleeping bag and forced to sleep outdoors, on the ground, in the open desert.
And just think about that for a second. The Arizona desert. You've got intense heat during the day, and it can get severely cold at night. So before the main event even starts, you have a group of people who are physically weakened from exposure, they're sleep deprived, and they're dehydrated from a 36-hour fast. Their ability to think critically, to make rational decisions, would have been, well, severely compromised. They were made vulnerable.
Exactly. And that's when he introduced the final test. The Sweat Lodge. The structure was this large dome, about 24 feet wide, but only 4 feet high, so you couldn't even stand up inside. It was covered in wood and canvas, with only one small opening for an entrance and exit, no other ventilation. All 50 of these weekend participants were crammed inside. It was built on a hot desert ground, and the temperature inside just soared. Estimates put it at 150 degrees Fahrenheit, maybe even as high as 200.
That's nearly 93 degrees Celsius. It's hotter than a sauna.
Much hotter. and Ray kept making it worse. He had staff place superheated rocks in the center, and he poured water on them, creating this scalding steam. And from outside the tent, he's just pushing them, telling them that true spiritual warriors have to overcome death. He actually told them, if I die, it's okay. He was comparing the experience to dying and being reborn.
It's pure psychological pressure, framing survival as a spiritual failure.
It became unbearable. People started collapsing. They couldn't breathe. They were screaming. Staff members went to Ray. They warned him that people were getting sick, that something was seriously wrong. But he refused to stop the activity. He would only let people leave if they gave up their warrior status. He was shaming them into staying. And then in a seat, the most critical decision. He explicitly forbade his staff from calling for emergency services. He insisted they try to treat people themselves first.
Which is just criminally negligent.
The result was a catastrophe. 3 people died. Kirby Brown collapsed inside with no pulse. James Shore died shortly after. And Liz Newman, she held on for 9 days in the hospital before she also passed away, all from heat stroke, dehydration, and respiratory distress. In total, 3 dead and 18 others needed serious medical treatment for their injuries. After the deaths, Ray just fled the camp. He was finally arrested 4 months later in February 2010. He claimed he was just consulting with others, not running from the police. He was charged with 3 counts of both manslaughter and negligent homicide.
But the verdict was controversial, to say the least. The court ruled that Ray didn't have the specific intent to kill anyone. They classified it as a tragic accident, not a malicious act. So he was convicted on 3 counts of the lesser charge, negligent homicide, and was sentenced to just 2 years in prison.
2 years for 3 lives. And it's so hard to understand the accident ruling because investigations later showed he had run similar sweat lodges before where people almost died. He knew the risks.
And that's the core of the public criticism. When a leader knowingly puts people in extreme danger and then actively prevents them from getting medical help by forbidding a 911 call, the line between negligence and a reckless disregard for human life gets incredibly blurry. The sentence felt, to many people, like a complete failure of accountability.
And the story doesn't end there. Ray was released in July 2013. After serving just 2 years, he went right back into the self-help industry. He started running the same kinds of motivational workshops all over again. The lesson here is a frightening one. It's about the immense power of charisma and what happens when extreme belief is completely divorced from safety and from reality. Self-improvement, finding a belief system, these can be valuable things, but they can never, ever be allowed to compromise your physical safety. If a guru or a leader tells you to ignore your own body when it's screaming in pain, that is your signal to run. If you are following this case and others like it, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel, Horror Doc. Please take care and be well. Goodbye.